Hi guys, it's Kelly Ledible here and I'm back with another video for W+9. Today we're going to be working with the Modern Calla Lily set. I actually requested that Dawn make this set and then I hadn't even had a chance to use it. I think it came out beautiful. She did such an amazing job. It's such a great set. And then I'm also using the Modern Peonies because I wanted the leaves. So I'm going to be stamping my images in colored ink. For the leaves, I'm going to be using Last Leaf and Ocean Drive. But I wanted to show you just very quickly, I kind of pre-stamp my arrangements and then to try out my color palette and see what I want my arrangement to be before I get into building a card, especially when I'm going to be doing so much stamping like I am with this. So I opted for the colored inks because, not that I was necessarily going for a no line coloring look altogether, like I'm fine at the lines showing, but I just kind of wanted it to blend in a little bit more. So I stamped multiples of these, I just kept moving it around. I used a little acetate trick to like cover up my paper, and then I would put the dirty stamp on the acetate, I'd pick it up with my Misty Door, and then I would remove the acetate, stamp my image again. That just seems to be what works best for me, especially when I want to stamp multiples of the same image. And I did stamp each of these twice because I wanted to make sure I was going to be able to see that outline since I am going to be doing some inking over it. For the actual calla lilies, I'm stamping in Sweet Nectar. I was kind of going for like a more peachy pink is really what I wanted. And the three on the bottom row have stems attached to them. So I'm just going to use my finger and wipe off any excess ink that got on there. I didn't feel it was necessary to like bust out the whole baby wipe and everything else. Just as long as it wasn't as dark as the floral images, I was fine with it. And then for those stems, I'm going to go back in with that same last leaf color. I had to zoom out so you could actually see what I was doing. And then the same thing, I'm just going to use my finger to wipe it off anywhere that it may have gotten on the actual bloom part of the flower. So once all these are done and stamped, I am going to do a little bit of inking in the background. And this is how you're going to get that really easy multicolor look. I'm going to do more because I'm a colorist and I like to color, but I really think that just doing this adds a beautiful variegated color to these images, and you could die cut them and use them and they'd be awesome. So I'm using a couple of different yellows, pinks, oranges, and I'm just smushing them down on my Ranger craft mat. So I was I'm using oxides, but you could do this with Distress ink as well. The Carved Pumpkin is a super, super strong color. So as you can see, I didn't even smush it down entirely. I just kind of used the side of it to like dab on around the other colors because I didn't want it to completely overtake the colors that I had, the other colors that I had going on. So I'm just going to smush, this is Canson watercolor paper. I didn't say that, my bad. And I'm just smushing that in there. And I like to dry in between layers. You don't have to, but it's just a good way to build up more intense color. The other thing is if you like texture, this is a great way. Don't add any more water to your craft mat and just pick it up and you can see all these like fun little water droplets that you get that really add a lot of texture to that background. So I want more vivid color, so I'm just going to do it again. I put down the same colors that I did before. I'm going to spray the daylights out of it, and then I'm going to put my paper back in. Now that I have some color down, I am paying a little bit more attention to like if I want there to be some pink over here, some yellow over here. But really, even if you never pay attention to that, you're still going to get a beautiful background as long as you're working with colors that mix nicely together. So like I wouldn't put a blue in this mix because I wouldn't know, where it was going to end up. If it was going to mix with the orange, if it was going to turn to brown, that whole thing. So for the leaves, I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm just using greens and bluish greens. So I'm using the Twisted Citron, the Cracked Pistachio, and the Peacock Feathers. And then again, the Mermaid Lagoon is a very strong color. So I am just adding a little bit of that in between the other colors, smushing that down until I get coverage that I'm happy with. Here, I didn't didn't feel like I put enough water on the craft mat, so my colors weren't really moving. So I'm just going to add more water right to the paper as well as to my craft mat so that I can really get those things flowing. This is super forgiving. So I encourage you, if you've never played with it before, to try this technique because it can get really, really beautiful results. I wanted my, like the background panel of my card to have some color, and I knew because of the way that I had kind of like tested out my arrangement before that my floral arrangement was going to be taking up the left-hand side of my card completely. So I wanted there to be some like blue watercolor that kind of pooled out from behind my flowers. So I'm using the Mermaid Lagoon, and I just wet the left-hand side of my paper to about, I don't know, the middle 3/4 in there. And then I had some water that was pooling that was giving me some hard edges on the right. I just picked that up with a dry paper towel. And now here I switched to, the first one was a 1-inch flat brush. This is a number 8 round brush. And I'm just trying to add a little bit more pigment to the left-hand side. I still want it to fade really soft on the right, but I wanted just some more color on the left. So I'm going to heat set this as well. And then if you've been here before, you know how we roll. I love the Perfect Pearls. And this is going to be a wedding card. I actually have a wedding next Saturday that I'm going to, that I made this card for. So they're, where are they going? They're going, I can't remember, somewhere tropical on their honeymoon. That's why I picked kind of this layout for it. So I use my Perfect Pearls. It's the color Perfect Pearls, with water. And I just like to spatter them on. So I'm using a number 2 round brush to do that because the mist will be finer, but you can use, whatever look you're going for. So now here's where you can see the ones in the background, how pretty they are with just those colors. You could die cut those, like I said, and it would be great. But I like to color, and I'm all about currently practicing with these colored pencils because I need some help in that area. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using Prismacolor color pencils, and I'm just going to go in and add some details. It's a lot of coloring. When I say add some details, it's not like 1 or 2 lines. I'm not going to lie to you. It is full-blown coloring, but I am not completely covering up the Distress Oxides in the background. So the way that I usually do these is I start with my lightest color. I work out to my darkest back into my lightest. When you're coloring with colored pencils, you're filling in the pulp of the paper. So you need all of those layers to make sure you're filling in all of those grooves, and it's going to give you a really smooth blended look. For the actual flowers, I picked a lot of pinks and peaches. You'll see as we move throughout the card, I kind of got away from that a little bit, but not in a bad way. It ended up being kind of good. So here, there's already lines that are drawn for you. Trust your illustrator, guys. They knew what they were doing when they drew it. So just pay attention to those lines that are there. If you're comfortable adding in more shading, like for me at the edge of this flower, there isn't any shading, but I wanted to add some of it so it looked, what? That's not even English. It looked more round. And so I did add, I took some, liberty and added the shading there, but, you don't have to do that. Even if you just follow your illustrator's lines, you're going to end up with a beautiful result. So again, we're just, building out from the lightest color out to the darkest, and then we'll build back out to the lightest. So I have a funny story to tell you. So in my craft room, my desk sits, if you follow me on Instagram, then you may have seen the photo. I shared it to the stories. Those delete after 24 hours. So if you missed it, you missed it. You can't go find it now. But so my desk is an L. My computer sits to the left, and I could actually craft to the right. And that's in front of this very large window that's in my craft room. Normally I'm crafting at night, so it isn't a big deal because it's like 2 a.m. Sun's not out. I don't have to worry about it. But this particular day, I was actually filming during the day. And so the blinds, the light was filtering in through the blinds, and I had a couple of little spots on my desk where, there was just sunlight showing through, and I didn't want that to be in my filming. I thought it would be distracting. It's important to have good lighting, all that jazz. So I turned them. I thought, okay, well, they're pointing down. I'll just point them up, and then the light won't filter onto my desk. So I went to go turn them, and as I'm turning, and I felt like I was turning forever, turning, the blinds straight up break. So they're dangling there on one side by just the little string. They're completely crooked. Now my 1 or 2 spots that I had on my desk for filming is a complete huge swatch of sunlight. So that's problematic. Okay, back to this card just briefly. I did go over some of the edges with white. It is going to change the vibrancy of your colors, but it will also help them blend really, really well. And so I was totally comfortable making the sacrifice for that vibrancy in order to get that blend, because I thought, well, if it washes it out too much, I can always go back and add in more color. And you can. So I'm just coloring up the stems, and then I'm going to color the second one off camera because it's the same type of flower. I did the same type of thing. This one is a fluted calla lily, which I think you probably see more often. That's what I carried in my wedding bouquet. And I have sped this up now that we've watched one in real time. So here's where I started at bringing in more of those brighter pinks, just because of the colors that I had going on in the background. And it's, it's going to be a tropical card, and I thought that it would be, really, really pretty with the brighter colors. But I wasn't getting the depth that I wanted from that super, I think it's magenta. I think that's actually what the colored pencil name is. And I just wasn't getting super good depth. So after I messed around with it and tried to blend it out for a little while, I decided that I was going to get a darker colored pencil. And the darker colored pencil that I picked, I think, was black raspberry, which is more of like a pinky purple. I'm also blending, for my stem, I'm blending that up into the bottom of the calla lily, because that is really how they look in real life. That green kind of grows up into the bloom, and it gives a more realistic look. Okay, back to this black raspberry. So I wanted more depth. And so I went in and put this in where it's going to be the darkest. So where that flute is, where all those petals are wrapping around each other, that is going to be the darkest. And then I started blending it out. And then I realized that I really, really liked that purple. And so I added it to some of the other flowers. Then I realized that it was making the other calla lilies that I colored a little bit washed out. They didn't look like they had enough depth. So I actually went in and picked some warm browns and added more depth to the flowers that I had already colored. Here, I got lazy. And the one on the bottom left, I actually started the brown first instead of going, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And that was a mistake. So please don't do what I did. Don't get lazy. I had to stamp an extra flower because I, didn't like that other one. It was way too brown. I'm super heavy handed with my darks. For this, for the leaves, for these like palm fronds, I used 3 different like teal colors. And the first one I just did one time. Again, back to that kind of laziness factor. The second one I did twice, and you can totally see the difference in the vibrancy of them. It's so doing the layers is super important. I know it's time consuming. Honestly, I don't really want to do it either, but building up those layers and building up the vibrancy of your color is extremely, extremely important. So I'm doing the leaves here as well. I'm just doing them in yellow greens, and I'm doing them the same way. Okay, back to the story. So the blinds are busted. They're hanging at a diagonal. I still have to film this card. I still have to. I have a deadline. It is what it is. So I decide basically that I'm going to hang a sheet above my window to block out the sunlight. I'm die cutting these. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to hang a sheet, but I don't know about any of your craft rooms, but I just have stuff everywhere. So I have a drawer set in front of this window. I have my desk in front of this window. It's not easily accessible. I'm not particularly tall. So I'm on the phone with my friend Dawn, and I realized that I'm going to have to climb on top of this desk to get this sheet up to tack it into the wall. Here I'm going to put Tombow Mono multi-glue on the back of them because it dries repositionable. I'm going to tap it with my fingers, and then this will help me get my arrangement where I want it to be so that I'm not chasing these little parts all over the place. So I'm on the phone with Dawn, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna have to climb on top of this desk. Like, I don't have a choice. I have to hammer these tacks into the wall to hold this sheet up, which I don't have a hammer, mind you. I'm doing it with the back end of a screwdriver because that's just how we roll. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do. So I climb up on the desk. I have Dawn on speakerphone. I climb up on the desk, and it's a glass desk, and I'm sweating while I'm doing it because it's warm, it's spring, we don't have our air on yet. So I'm like trying to like stand up on this desk. I have all my craft stuff everywhere. I'm pretty sure I'm going to plummet to my death. And as I'm hammering them in, I'm like telling her, like, if you hear a loud crash, this is my address. Call 911. Send the police. This is the city that I live in. Like, send them to save me because there's nobody home. And if I crash and burn right now, nobody's going to know I'm dying on my floor. So anyway, I did end up getting up the sheet, which I have to tell you was about 3 days ago, and it is still there. I'm fairly sure that my neighbors think either our house has become abandoned, that we are murdering people in here, or that we're just, we just are totally classless. Because it faces the front of my house. Like, people driving by are like, what's that sheet on the window? Whatever. Like I said, there's nothing I can do about it because it's necessary. It was necessary for me to get my filming done, and I had to work, so I didn't even have time to like get blinds. Anyway, we're back to building this card. So don't be afraid to trim down your pieces parts. You can see on the bottom there that I kind of cut off that leaf. I'm gonna cut off this big one here. I'm going to end up cutting that down as well. I didn't even color the whole thing because I knew I didn't need it. I just kind of needed the end of the palm fronds to make this work. So with the leaves, I adhered them down straight to the paper with the glue. That's what I did. And I did have to play around with this a little bit. It's a lot of kind of moving parts to get the arrangement that I wanted. But I glued the stem of these flowers down. I did not glue the actual blooms because I wanted to pop them up. So I just kind of built as much as I could, and then went in and added my foam tape. That's what I'm doing here. And then that way the stem is still tucked underneath the leaf, but the bloom is still kind of lifted, and it gives it some dimension, which I really, really do like. Now, when I was stamping the card, I stamped it with some of the flowers hanging over the edge, which I have to tell you I usually regret because then come the end of it, I have to cut them off, and I'm like, I just colored this whole thing and now I gotta cut it in half. But nature of the beast, because frequently when you're building something like this, where a whole arrangement or a pattern, it's important to kind of let them hang over the edge. It gives your card a look of continuity. So now we're at the trimming portion of it. Everything is glued down. And this is, it's just on a regular panel. I haven't put it on a card base yet. So I can just flip it over and use my scissors to trim those off. Some of them I had to trim through the foam tape that, it's not so thick that it was a problem as long as you have a pair of good sharp scissors. So just going through, trimming that off. And then I don't usually show it because coloring takes so long, guys. And my videos are already long, so I don't usually show me putting it on a card base. But most of the time I do actually put them on a card base. So here I'm just using Tembo Mono multi-glue to go ahead and adhere this to my card base. I score them with my We Are Memory Keepers trim and scoreboard, and then I have a Teflon bold folder that I use to make sure that I have a good edge on it. Here I was just getting, I had glue on my nail. That's basically the long and short of why I was getting aggravated. Because I had glue that had dried on my nail, and every time I went to stick these sequins down, it kept sticking to my nail instead of sticking to the paper. And I know my pain. So once I got the sequins down, these are just some clear sequins. I used glossy accents on top. I went in with some clear shimmer just on the blooms. I really love the way that they came out. I think that they do look more realistic, which I was really pleased with. And then that is the whole card. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you'll give something that you've seen here a try, whether it's just the Distress Oxides or just the colored pencils, just something to kind of break out of your, your comfort zone and try something new. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.